or a possible meeting where people can come join and talk about issues or things they're having, and then be able to go back to their individual planning events will be super important. If you're in person, the way we did this is we were at a giant hotel. We had a centralized place where people could come and talk and then go back. And so people were walking, everyone was tracking on their Fitbit or whatever, how many steps they could get in by going back and forth and making sure that the communication was happening. It's impossible, obviously, for individuals and teams to be in every event at the same time. So you have to say, what are the important areas ahead of time? What are the important topics that you believe you'll need to talk about? And then make sure there's, again, a place for people to come together and have that communication. And usually schedule that into the time. Usually during breakouts is the best time for those kind of things.
Yes,
Kathy?
I'll just add to what Matt said. So now we would use tools, whether it's a Slack channel specifically set up to support various topics in PI planning, or a Microsoft Teams channel, whatever your communication tool is. But to have specific channels set up, it's very important, and make sure that everybody understands what those channels are, and make sure that somebody, let's say from shared services or from the product management team or solution management team, knows that they need to be monitoring those channels. The breakout rooms that Matt suggested, spot on in remote times. In person, like Matt, we would usually have some designated area where the groups, whether it's an infrastructure group or security, architects, solution management, whoever those high pulling people need to be, right? The people that you're always pulling at, I need more information, I need more information. Make sure that there is a very well-known place for those people and how to connect with them. So those are the things that I would suggest. Matt, anything else you want to add to this topic?
Yeah, I would just make sure there's a BVIR, that really helps make sure that everyone can see what types of things you're talking about, dependencies, those kind of things. So these discussions don't just happen without any kind of, hey, this is what we decided, this is what we're doing. That's going to be the best way to kind of disseminate the information. So make sure there's a place where people can come and see what's going on.
Yes. So I absolutely agree with Matt. Make sure you've got your program board, your solution board up and running. Make sure you have an easy go-to place for open issues and open questions, and just make it as easy as possible for people to know who needs what information from whom. So it's all about facilitating that communication, making sure everybody has their own pathways to each other.
And depending on the relationship between the trains will depend on which kind of roles you might want to have in that centralized place, right? If we're talking, we're across the portfolio, different value streams, we may want to have LPM representation, that's in that room to help answer questions and do things. If it's a solution train, we'd want solution train type folks around there to help with those as well.
Yes, and so that's time up on this topic, as you can see here on your screen. If you look in your tab with your lean coffee table, you've got the option to vote whether we continue talking on this topic, you want to end this topic, or you have no preference. I'm going to go ahead and vote no preference so I can get this out of the way, and we'll see what you guys decide. As you're voting, I will just say this, that if you have a group, let's say of business owners who are serving that role for multiple trains in a solution train, you may need to, as an RTE, schedule specific time in your agenda for the business owners to address topics in train A or train B or train C. And so depending upon the nature of the relationships of those kind of specialized people, you'll decide if you need to build specific activities into the agenda or not. Okay, so it looks like the end topics win because no preference will go to the majority. And so great. Thanks, Matt. I'm going to move this into our discussed column and let's bring over next. So here our topic is, what is the best way for solution architects to engage the train? How to optimize their interactions with the trains. That's a great topic. Thank you for bringing this up. So first I want to talk about solution architects and make sure we're on the same page about where solution architects fit within the scaled agile framework, because the person who posted this question may be thinking about the role differently than I am. So in SAFE, solution architects are providing technical guidance and direction for all of the Agile release trains within the solution train. So if it's that level that we're talking about, rather than system architects who serve one Agile release train, then here's my recommendation. Solution architects, because they're working across all of the trains within a solution train, need to really understand what are the integration points between the work being produced by each of the trains. And so with that larger scale vision in place of how these trains are going to support each other, how their work is going to interconnect, that's what solution architects should be focusing on. The solution architects will also need to find the right balance between looking at future needs and supporting the current PI's execution activities. So it's about finding that balance. Matt, you want to share? And I think I'm going to bring up the safe big picture too, just to use as a backdrop.
The other thing I would highly suggest is, even though you have a solution architect for your solution train, that still having the roles of system architects on the individual trains and them coordinating together, right? That solution architect's going to have the big picture end to end for the whole solution. Each system architect on each train should have the end to end for that train, but they also have to understand how that end to end in their train fits into the larger solution. Like Kathy said, what are those integration points? They need to know how they integrate to the larger solution. Solution architects should be talking to those system architects and making sure that whatever decisions are being made at the train level match up to the overall vision of the architecture for the solution. And so that solution architect will help those folks to see that bigger picture, and then work together to make sure that the guidance fits that, and the architectural runway being built fits into that as well.
Yes, and thanks for bringing up the architectural runway, Matt, because I think one other important way for the solution architects to engage is to be talking with their partners, their system architects on each of the trains, so that they can have conversations about capacity allocation with the solution management team and with the business owners for the trains. One of the things that all architects need to do, regardless of where they fit within the framework, is to be able to advocate for the capacity to do some innovation work or exploration work, to make sure that you have capacity to really decrease any technical debt that may have built up, and to lay the foundation for the future work as well. That's a really important part of the solution architect's role. They need to be good communicators, not only with their technical counterparts, but with solution management and business owners as well. Matt?
Yeah, I would just echo that. Just like at the train level, you have the RTE, product management, and your system architects. At the solution train, you have solution management, the STE, and the uh, the solution architect working together to see where the vision of the business wants to go, what problems you're going to solve, and then be able, and they'll spend a lot of their time on future. Sometimes, they need to spend time on what's going on in the current PI, but they spend a lot of time looking at the future and helping with that continuous exploration from an architecture perspective, because we really don't want to end up with insufficient runway and kind of without thinking about where we're headed in the future. Okay, that's our time.
Thanks, Matt. And so as you guys are voting on whether or not you want to continue this conversation, again, apparently I'm going to give you my last 30 seconds. And that is, my last recommendation would be to have the system architects ask the people on the trains, how can we better serve you? Right? The system, or excuse me, solution architect should be asking for feedback and use that to help optimize how they're supporting the trains within their solution train. Okay, looks like we are finished on this. So this last question here, so how would a system architect optimize their interactions across multiple trains if they're supporting multiple arts? Yes, and so if a single system architect is supporting multiple trains, they would need to spend time talking with the teams to find where the greatest need is. They would need to really focus on the upcoming needs, I think, to lay the foundation for the future PIs, trusting in the teams to effectively execute and build the architecture and share back their feedback.
I would just say I would not recommend having one system architect across multiple trains. I just have to put that out there. There's a lot of work for one system architect on a train.
Thank you. You are absolutely right. It is typically more work than a single system architect can do. Thank you. And that was a nice use of adding comments. So thank you for doing that. If you want to clarify or add an additional element to the question or being discussed, you can add your topics here. So Matt, this is over to you to start.
Okay, so how do shared services scale across multiple arts? So this comes up everywhere, right? And so one of the things that's really important is the whole identification of your value stream, and then really identifying the people you need when you break that into arts. What people do you really need all the time to design, build, test, deploy, and release to your customers? If these shared services are needed all the time, they should be dedicated to trains, right? Because if they're needed that much, then, anytime you don't dedicate them to them, you're going to have a bottleneck in that system somewhere. If you have so few people that you have to share them across the trains, you may want to reconsider, and this is where I talk to like the CEOs, CIOs, that group. You may want to reconsider your configuration of people. You may not need as many people on each train. If you have this bottleneck here, you may need to spend some of that money on getting more of those shared services and putting them on the trains. With that said, if you are in a place where you have shared services that are supporting multiple trains, then you'll need to understand what need does each train have for them. They're going to have to coordinate. Hey, I need to go help train A during this iteration. I'm going to have to go help train B during this iteration. And so they're going to need a place to understand where the dependencies on them are and where they're going to have to spend their time. And so scaling that, it becomes difficult, right? It's difficult to scale someone who has to be on multiple trains during a PI. And so that you'll have to spend more time making sure on coordination and making sure that that person can really do the job on multiple trains. A lot of, if they can build automation into what they're doing where people can self-serve, that's probably, for me, that's the way you would scale if you can't scale with people. Is, okay, how can we spend some of our time automating what we do so that people can just self-serve from each train, and we're just helping to support that tool set or whatever mechanism we're using to help support that. Kathy?
Yes, so I agree with what Matt has said, so I'll just add a couple of variations here. When you have these shared services that need to work across multiple arts, it's important for them to have a very good understanding of priorities, because my current client, they are struggling with this topic where they have some critical shared services people, but they don't have enough of those people to serve all of the demands. And so what they are asking for is clarity and priorities across the organization so that they can do the best with their limited capacity. And then, as Matt said, that obviously is a bottleneck. And so that bottleneck needs to be addressed, because that will impede flow for, literally hundreds or thousands of people. And so then we want to look at how can we enable people within the trains to perhaps do some of that work, or as Matt said, can we automate any of this so that we can reduce the reliance on individual people doing repetitive tasks? So it really brings important topics to bear. One last tip that I'll share is at a PI planning event, make sure that you have swim lanes in your program board and or your solution board to show those dependencies on the specific shared services area. So you might have a swim lane for security and for network administration, or for whatever the topics would be in your context. Matt, last comments?
Yeah, the important thing is for them to understand their capacity, because I've seen people do that and they have all these dependencies on those groups, and then that group doesn't understand their capacity, and then they fail at being able to meet those needs. And without, like you said, priority, they sometimes focus on the wrong things.
Yes, everybody's doing their best, right?
Yep.
The clarity on priorities across the enterprise is very important. We'll give it a... Okay, looks like that's all the votes coming in that will come in. All right, so just waiting to see if the numbers change again. Okay, it looks like we are at the end topic choice. Excellent. Yes, and so these tips for advocating for the architecture of Runway. It is going to come back to this very important topic of capacity allocation to make sure that you, whether you're part of a shared services team or on the Agile Release Train itself, that you have time and capacity to build the foundation, build the skills, build the self-service functions that are needed to really improve throughput. And I think the way you can do that is to provide some data to your stakeholders to help them understand the impact of having or not having the capacity to do the things that need to be done.
Yeah, I always say you need to use data and metrics and other things to sell why the architectural runway is important. Just saying a bunch of technical things to a group of business folks doesn't really help, right? And so they need to understand how that affects what they're doing, and so make that case. There is a case for it, and you just got to make it and learn to speak their language.
Yes, exactly. You have to speak in the language of these are the outcomes, these are the results, the impacts of having or not having the capacity to do these things. Again, being able to communicate with people in their own language is just very, very important. And again, you can run an experiment to help them see the impact of changing things as well. Okay, I'm going to bring over and start this next topic. This one is to me. So after starting with Essential, Safe, and One Art, advice for maturing lean portfolio management. Okay, oops, when the rest of the organization is still traditional annual project-based budgeting. Great, this is an excellent question. Thank you for submitting it. So when you have One Art and the rest of the organization is still doing annual project-based budgeting, I would suggest that you can still use some of the ideas in lean portfolio management. So one, you can encourage the portfolio team to establish a Kanban system to increase transparency of what is being worked on and what is potential work that's coming, even if your Kanban board shows traditional projects. The visibility will be really important, and it can help increase alignment. So, and having a portfolio Kanban system and clarifying the decisions that go with it, that is one of the 4 LPM guardrails within SAFE. So portfolio Kanban, regardless of how project-based it is, it will help you. 2, ask questions about alignment and see what you can do by asking questions to get your portfolio leaders aligned. And then that can shift into a conversation about capacity allocation. Are we spending enough of our capacity from a portfolio perspective on new business functionality and enablers? Are we laying enough foundation for the future? And then again, you can ask questions that get you to one of the other guardrails in lean portfolio management, which is looking at your investments by horizon. And so, if you are not a portfolio leader, asking some of these questions of the people in your portfolio can help them start to lay a better foundation for using lean portfolio management topics. I'll just share one other piece of advice, and then I'll hand it over to Matt, and that would be, if you are part of the lean portfolio management group, or perhaps you're an Epic owner or a project leader, start to use some of the thinking tools and the mindset that come from the world of lean startup. Because thinking about what are we trying to achieve, what are the leading indicators, what experiments can we run, what data can we gather to use to make subsequent decisions, that style of thinking will again lay a really good foundation for when you're ready to adopt lean portfolio management. Matt?
Yeah, totally agree with what Kathy said there. Anytime I'm helping, and I'm helping a group do it now, is trying to understand your work. And the only way that I've really seen that is create that Kanban board, put all the work up there. Anytime I talk to CFOs or CEOs, et cetera, the budget isn't going to change really. It's really a fixed budget for the year. And so you're really trying to understand capacity, whether they're fixed projects or, now your agile work coming through trains. And so it helps the folks start to make better decisions. They start to see things, and they start to see projects, and they start to ask questions. Why are we doing this? What does done mean for this thing that we decided to do? And when they start asking those questions and they can't answer them, they often will stop certain projects that they had started in the traditional way, because no one can really articulate that. And so again, I would do the same thing Kathy said: get it all up there, all your work up there, figure out where it is, if you're implementing it now or it hasn't started, and then start to apply some of the things that you would with if everything were in a lean portfolio management area. And simple things for the projects would be, like I said, what's the outcome we're expecting? How do we know we're done? And and how are we going to measure that throughout this thing? And then it will help you make decisions that you would make at a portfolio level.
Okay, so, oops, Linda, I see you got a question there. So we'll give you guys a chance to vote. And Linda asked, can you repeat those startup items you mentioned, please? Yes, so I would start with establishing a portfolio Kanban system and putting up all the work on it, regardless of whether it's project-based or true safe Epic based. Get the work up there, identify the workflow, right? And then you can start to measure the workflow and do all kinds of other things. So start there, and then capacity allocation conversations about epics. So from a big picture perspective, are we allocating capacity the way we think we should be? Make that conversation intentional. And from capacity allocation, I would start to ask questions about overall investment horizons. And then I would start to introduce lean startup ideas, running experiments, what are the, asking about leading indicators and using the results of those leading indicators. So that's a path. It's not the only path to take.
It's a good one. I'm using it right now, so.
Yes. Okay, great. It looks like we will end this topic. Thanks, everybody. Drag that over. All right, Matt, this will be to you.
All right. Excellent. So besides PPM, what metrics do you use and why? So I'm going to kind of go off a little bit here, because metrics are very important to me. And I've had lots of conversations. One of our colleagues, Michael Richards, yes. So he shared with me a blog he wrote a while back about metrics. And I read through his blog and picked out metrics and said, yes, those are the metrics we really care about. They're outcome based. And so I'll often use the metrics that he talked about, because I want to give him credit, because he's the one that did them. So some things like, hey, what's the business impact? Fitness function, context sensitive, the key business performance measures that will be impacted by what the art's doing. So I often will look at the operational value stream, say, what are we trying to improve here? What are we trying to change for the better for our business? What metric are we going to use from a business perspective to help us understand that? This idea of fitness function would be, okay, what is that metric, and how is the stuff we're building helping to move that metric, right? Doesn't mean something we'll build will necessarily be the only factor that influences that metric, but it will help with that one. Predictability, we already mentioned that in the PPM stuff. So And then speed for me, like what's our average lead time for features? How long is it taking us from when we have an idea to when it's actually in the hands of our users? How long is it take? And remember, lead time means from idea, like someone wants it and it's an idea, to when they actually are using it. The other one you want to see is execution time. When we decide to put it into a PI, how long does that take? That's another metric we can use. Deployment cycle time. As our deployments taking longer, how are we measuring that? MTTR, if you know what that is, mean time to recovery. That's when you have an incident. How long does it take us to get back to normal, back to fixed? Production deployments per PI, are we increasing that so customers get what they're looking for faster? Are we doing that? So, and then he shares some advanced metrics that we could talk about as well, but just given our time, I'm also going to talk about, he talks about culture. I know kind of in the ones that SAFE says, we do like some sort of employee score. Using employee net promoter score is a really good way to do that, usually done at the PI boundaries. I really like to see how the folks are doing that are actually working in these trains. What are they experiencing? Are their lives getting better? Do they see they're more influential than they were before? Those kinds of things. Our staff turnover percentage, that's a real metric. If we're losing people, something's wrong, right? So we need to look at that and fix that. And then quality, this is, I started my career in the quality field, and just looking at defects, how many defects are we finding outside of our iterations, outside of our PIs? How many are being reported by customers? Is that trend going down or not? Those are probably the biggest things for me. Kathy, sorry, I took a lot of time. Go ahead.
No need to apologize, Matt, because I can only echo what you said. So focus on outcomes. What are the business outcomes that we're trying to achieve? Are we having an impact on them? So you should be able to show where your releases happen and what kind of an impact are they having on your foundational metrics. So whether that's your revenue, your number of users or number of members or sales or what have you, you want to be able to show an impact on the business. And everything else that Matt mentioned right there, right? Customer satisfaction, employee satisfaction, cycle time, quality metrics. The only thing I would add is I would make sure that where you've defined leading indicators, that you're reviewing the data associated with those leading indicators and using that information to help guide subsequent decisions. A lot of people are starting to use more of the flow metrics, but those flow metrics are all things that Matt touched on, just using slightly different language. Okay, we're letting the votes come in here. Okay, I see the numbers slowing down, so I'm going to assume that we are finished. Okay, and yes, we'll share the blog post, Matt, so when you get a chance.
I'll have to re-find it. I have a document I wrote from it that I can just share as well.
Sure, you can send it to Alyssa. She can send it out as part of the after. Excellent, thank you. Okay, so up next. What are the most common mistakes you see with regard to arts, and what strategies have you found successful to avoid or manage those challenges? This is a huge topic, so I'm just going to get started. One of the most common mistakes I see is that the Agile Release Train is not really organized around value delivery. We don't have all the right people on the train that we should have on the train. And the reason that often happens is because of organizational boundaries or political challenges. So that's one of the most common mistakes that I see. Poorly formed art. And so how do you avoid or manage those challenges? The way you can avoid it or recover from it would be to go through the value stream identification steps that SAFE recommends, where you identify your operational value streams, you identify your development value streams, and you derive your arts from the development value streams. That process really makes a difference. Yes, does it take getting buy-in from the right players to redesign an art? Yes, but it has a huge impact. I saw that last year. If I had more time, I would tell you a story about this, but it really does make a difference in throughput and decision making. So that's the first one. Matt, why don't we just trade off? So go ahead and share yours.
So I just wanted to emphasize one thing there. If you notice in the implementation roadmap, the SAFE implementation roadmap, you train executives, managers, et cetera. Then you do the value stream workshop. The one thing I've seen is when that value stream workshop is delegated. So you don't have the right leaders in that group to help break silos. And so when that happens, that's when you start getting value streams that match the organization instead of value streams that really are cross-functional, really don't, minimize dependencies. And so that's usually where I see the breakdown happen. Like Kathy said, organizational structures become the value streams, or that's where people will start because you weren't brought in or SAFE wasn't brought in from a high enough leader. And so you're going to start wherever you can. And so the value stream's not going to be great. But as you learn, one of the important things is that this value stream identification is not a one-time thing. And from your inspect and adapt, you should see problems related to the way you're structured. And that should be a catalyst for you to look through some of these things. And that's the strategy I like to use. If I can't fix it in the beginning, we're going to use data to help us say something's wrong and let's revisit this.
And I'll just add that when you really want to address lean portfolio management and get to a place where you are funding development value streams, we strongly recommend that you run through value stream identification again to make sure that you are properly aligned so that the funding makes the most sense. So coming back to other common mistakes with arts, one mistake that I see over and over again is having insufficient product management time. So the product management role is often filled by business people. And in a lot of SAFE implementations, we see that those business people are doing their best, but it's being treated as something they do, off the side of their desk. It's in between other operational work. And in those cases, the 100 and some odd people on the train tend to suffer because they're not getting enough product management vision and roadmap and guidance. We're going to run out of time here. So I'm going to vote no preference, but I encourage you guys to vote whether or not you want to extend this topic.
Yeah, and while you're voting, I'm just going to say the other mistake I often see is we don't fill the roles properly. And so you'll have RTEs stretched thin, system architects, product owners, product managers. And because they aren't like Kathy said, if the product management doesn't have sufficient time and these other roles don't, then things go awry. People say, I've often heard we don't have budget for those roles. And I say, so what good is your 2,000 developers who don't have a clue what they're doing? It's, and unfortunately, my comments usually get rid of some of the developers to get the right roles if you can't get more budget.
Great. So we extended the topic. So I'll share another topic here on biggest mistakes. So the inadequate staffing, not having the right people on the train. Those are the most crucial problems that I see. One of the other big challenges or most common mistakes that I see with regard to arts is not paying attention to the technical fundamentals, right? So an Agile Release Train wants to deliver the right solutions at the right time. And so what does that really mean? It means making sure that you are providing the teams with the tools, the technical know-how, and the time to apply some of the DevOps thinking and practices that we know makes a very serious impact on quality and throughput. And, so that's your time to market. So really need to support that. If you have a lot of technical debt, it needs to be addressed because that will slow down the train. Matt, what other common mistakes do you see?
Yeah, I just want to emphasize what you just said. And one of the strategies around that is to have coaches that are focused on technical agility. You can only get so far with process changes, right? If your code, your architecture, if all those things aren't in a great space and you have tons of technical debt and architecture is not loosely coupled, it's very tightly coupled, you have these monoliths, it's going to be very hard for you to be agile as a train. And that's where we see trains start to just like not become better over time, because there's only so much you can do with process. One more thing is not having the right business owners as part of your art. And so if the level of business owners is too low, like, hey, our PMs will just be our business owners, then decision-making usually can't happen, the decision-making you want. And so one of the strategies I have is I'll usually pair up a business person with a technical, person at a high enough level in the organization that the two of them usually will have fiduciary responsibility over the group and have responsibility over what that group delivers. If they have both of those things and they can make decisions on budgetary things, on, what things get done and don't get done, then you have the right mix. And then I've seen the train be very successful. You also want business owners that are highly engaged and not absent, right? That's another thing I see with arts struggling to really, make the progress that we know they can make.
Yeah, excellent. And so I agree, business owners is crucial to your success. Business owners that overly delegate to product management tend to cause some predictable problems. Yes, and again, if you really want to get to lean portfolio management, make sure you've got good business owner engagement here. So we will vote one more time on whether or not you want to continue this topic, or if you've got no preference. I saw a note there, somebody referenced the SAFe 5.1 content. I think that the improvements in the value stream articles are good. They're very long overdue. I can't tell you how many times in the past, I've said to people, right now, when you look at SAFE, you're only seeing development value streams. You're not seeing operational value streams on the big picture, et cetera, et cetera. And so the changes that are part of 5.1, I think will make things more clear to a lot of people, and it will help some of the additional changes that are coming. So we had, I was part of the Safe Fellow Retreat that we ran for 3 days last week, and you will be glad to know that we are making even additional improvements in these areas. So more good stuff to come.
I think we have time for one more.
Yeah, if we make it quick.
Yep.
Can I start this one, Matt?
Yep, please
This
do.
is a passion of mine. So
Yep, go ahead.
I should have set the timer for 4 minutes. So should the RTE run design thinking sessions? Yes, yes. So how can you learn to facilitate a design thinking session? There are a couple really good blog posts out there and some good books. I'll share that information with Alyssa so she can share it with everybody else. But I want to emphasize one thing. The reason I'm so passionate that yes, RTEs can run design thinking sessions, it's because when you think about the role of an RTE, right? To lead the people on the train and help everybody get better at what they're doing and delivering better business results. And so what is design thinking all about? It's using your empathy to understand what are the problems that we are facing, using your empathy and engaging a whole variety of voices and perspectives and coming up with a deeper understanding about the real problem that needs to be solved, coming up with ideas, going through ideation, prototyping ideas, injecting some innovation thinking in there, and asking those questions, how might we solve this problem? Then coming up with a solution and testing it out. It's all the skills that an RTE wants everybody else on their train to use. So I think there's a ton of synergy there with RTEs leading those sessions.
Yeah, and I would also, if there's a product manager or a product person that could lead that as well. So in my current engagement, we have product managers leading those discussions all the time when they're trying to come up with new features and new things. RTE is, like Kathy said, the RTE needs some coaching and some guidance to help them do it. But yeah, they should be able to do it. Just like story mapping, same kind of thing. It's a technique that the Scrum Master should understand and help run RTE, the same thing. And then product should pick up on it and be able to do some of those things on their own as well over time.
Yeah, I like what you said, Matt. We absolutely want product managers and solution managers to know and use design thinking. And so, yeah, that's a great idea, partnering. The other people within your organization who probably have a great deal of design thinking skills who could partner with an RTE would be your user experience people.
Yep.
So, those are skills that they base their entire careers on. And so they're also a really good resource to help you plan things out.
I mean,
and that's probably
system architects should use it too, right? Yeah. Exactly.
And so that's bringing us just to the end of the hour here. So I want to say thank you guys very much for your participation in asking questions here, in adding additional topics. We will follow this up with a message. Alyssa, you want to talk about follow-up actions here?
Yeah, sure. So some things. The first is that we did record this webinar, and I will be sending it out 24 hours from now, and I'll be sure to include those additional materials that Kathy and Matt mentioned on the call. Our last and final Lean Coffee will happen on February 19th at 11:30 a.m. Central with Kathy Marshak and her fellow Icon Say fellow Charlene Cuenca. And they will be covering advanced topics in enterprise SAFe. So we hope to see you there. And finally, if you have any comments or feedback regarding this Lean Coffee format, please share them with us. We are always trying to learn and improve, and we want to make this time valuable for you guys. So thank you so much. Thank you, Matt and Kathy, for sharing your expertise with us today. It was a very enlightening session. All right.
Thanks. Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye,
Have a
everybody.
great day.